Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. This bag was the inspiration for today's video. It has been suggested that it may have been part of an interesting act of memorialisation. In today's video, we're going to look at this bag's rumoured owner. We'll also be discussing both some of the recorded events of this person's life and the ones that might be a little bit more based in rumour. But before we take a look at today's topic, I want to say an absolutely massive thank you to History Hit for sponsoring another video on this channel. History Hit brings you the stories that shaped the world through their award-winning podcast network and online history channel. It's like Netflix, but all history. With History Hit, you can watch hundreds of hours of original history documentaries anywhere, anytime, on any device. Brought to you by expert historians such as Dan Snow, Professor Susanna Lipscomb, Dan Jones, and more. In addition to already having hundreds of expert-led programmes, they add 2 more every week. History Hit also launch 19 new episodes weekly across 8 podcasts, which includes the world's leading history podcast, Dan Snow's History Hit. As I am a North Londoner by birth, but certainly an East Londoner by choice, it was very special for me to see the places and the stories that I know so well feature in this absolutely brilliant programme. The women of the East End were foundational to the success of the trade union movement and universal suffrage. They were trailblazers in science too, and their legacy endures to the present day. Click the link in my description box to find out more and to subscribe to History Hit. As an added bonus, History Hit are offering my viewers a very special discount, because if you use the code HistoryHit at checkout, you will get 60% off your first 6 months. Now, this generous discount means that you can subscribe to History Hit for less than £3 a month. Thanks again to History Hit for sponsoring this video. But now it's time for me to introduce you to Bess Throckmorton. Elizabeth, commonly called Bess, was the daughter of Sir Nicholas Throckmorton and his wife, Anne Carew. And I think for some, maybe many of you, those surnames will be ringing some bells. And that's because both of Bess's parents came from prominent, well-remembered families with connections to the royal court. And as we are all students of history, I think we've all probably noticed that there is a flip side to the wealth, prominence and privilege that came with proximity to the monarch. And that was, in far too many cases, a heightened risk of ending your days on the scaffold. Indeed, it has been said that Bess lived her life in the shadow of the Tower of London. Bess was born in 1565, but in the decades before her birth, suspicions and indeed convictions for treason had reverberated through her family. Take Bess's maternal grandfather, Sir Nicholas Carew. He was imprisoned in the Tower of London before being beheaded as a traitor on Tower Hill back in 1539. It was alleged that he had involved himself in a plot that sought to remove King Henry VIII from the throne in favour of that king's cousin, Henry Courtenay, Marquess of Exeter. Then, over a decade later, but still before Bess's birth, her own father found himself imprisoned in the Tower of London. After the death of King Edward VI in 1553, Sir Nicholas Throckmorton appears to have supported the accession of Lady Jane Grey to the throne. Now, it's worth mentioning that this support may have been real, or it might have been just for show. He may have been hedging his bets either way. Regardless, he would soon switch sides to support the claim of Mary Tudor, who became Queen Mary I. However, a year later, in 1554, in the aftermath of the White Rebellion, Sir Nicholas would be imprisoned in the Tower of London. He would be tried for treason, but would be acquitted. He would eventually be bonded out of jail in 1555. However, when the next threat to Mary's reign, which was posed by Sir Henry Dudley, reared its head, it does seem that Sir Nicholas was inspired to flee to France, presumably to avoid being accused of being complicit in that plot too. By 1557, Sir Nicholas and his wife had managed to convince Queen Mary of his loyalty, and she ultimately, therefore, allowed him to return to England and also returned all of his confiscated property back to him. He would go on to serve Queen Mary's half-sister and successor, Elizabeth, as a diplomat, although not as a great one, to be honest. And then in 1569, he was accused of trying to broker a marriage between Mary Queen of Scots and Thomas Howard, the 4th Duke of Norfolk, and this was something that was seen as being a potential threat to Elizabeth's own rule. And so Sir Nicholas would spend much of the rest of his life under surveillance and suspicion. Sir Nicholas died of natural causes on the 12th of February 1571. His daughter Bess was around 6 years old, but this was nowhere near being the end of matters. When Bess was around 19, her cousin, Francis Throckmorton, would be executed at Tyburn for allegedly plotting to depose Queen Elizabeth in favour of Mary Queen of Scots. These complexities and controversies did not, however, exempt Bess herself from taking up a prominent place in Queen Elizabeth's household. Indeed, she would be welcomed to court in the very same year that her cousin Francis was executed. On the 8th of November 1584, Bess was made a gentlewoman of the Privy Chamber. This was a highly coveted and well-rewarded role that would bring her into daily, close contact with Queen Elizabeth I. Virtuous behaviour and total chastity in unmarried ladies was the requirement if you wished to maintain this role. If one of Elizabeth's ladies wished to get married, they would need to seek their queen's permission. And this permission was something that increasingly and frequently she was becoming known for being utterly unwilling to give. For what comes next, the exact timing is debated, but what is clear is that before too long, Bess was starting to gamble with her queen's favour. She began a secret liaison with one of Elizabeth's own favourites, Walter Raleigh. Walter had been knighted on the 6th of January 1585 to make him Sir Walter Raleigh. Just over 6 years later, by November 1591, Bess was well into her first pregnancy because this is the time when she and Walter marry in secret. 4 months after this clandestine wedding, on the 29th of March, the couple were baptising their son, Damarai. Less than a month after this baptism, on the 27th of April, Bess returned to her duties at court, as if nothing had changed. It is said that she continued to attempt to conceal the fact that she had become both a wife and a mother, and for a little while at least, it does seem that she was successful. The Queen, at least, didn't know. The secret would, however, come out in May. At this point, Bess and Walter were both taken into custody, and they would be placed in the Tower of London on the 7th of August. However, the financial success of the fleet that Raleigh had recently sent to the Azores, a fleet which returned to England just a few weeks after Raleigh's incarceration, having succeeded in capturing the richly laden Madre de Dios from the Portuguese, may have been one of the things that began to soften the Queen's rage, because this voyage and its success was now filling her coffers. And so, Raleigh was removed from the Tower of London to help sort out the spoils aboard the ships. However, it is also possible that the Queen's sympathies may have been pricked for the couple. It does seem likely, due to his apparent disappearance from the records, that Bess and Walter's young son, Damarai, would have passed away around this time. Bess would be released from the Tower of London on December the 22nd. And maybe the Queen was pleased with Walter's spoils, or she felt sympathy for the couple at the loss of their son, perhaps both. Regardless, her forgiveness was not going to be total. Both Bess and Walter remained unwelcome at Elizabeth's court. Indeed, Walter was only allowed to return to court in 1597, by which time he and Bess's second son, who was also called Walter, was already around 4 years old. As Elizabeth's reign wound to a close, Bess's husband made a useful former ally into an incredibly dangerous enemy, because he took aim at Robert Cecil. Cecil, for his part, found himself some new friends, and he and they were in near constant correspondence with King James VI of Scots. And of course, they're going to be promoting the interests of themselves and their faction, which is understandably going to result in them throwing scorn on the reputation of those they saw as potential problems. And by engaging in conflict with Robert Cecil, Walter Raleigh had become one of these potential problems. After the death of Queen Elizabeth, on the 24th of March 1603, it does seem that the Raleighs hoped that they might be able to find a way into royal and courtly favour as a couple once again. Soon, though, they would figure out that this was simply not to be, because instead Walter would be stripped of his monopolies and of his captaincy of the guard, both of which happened in May. Additionally, he was told that he must give up Durham Place, because the Bishop of Durham had managed to successfully petition King James to have his London home, or at least his traditional London home, returned to him. Walter, for his part, perhaps as a reaction to feeling slighted in these ways, was soon tied up in treason. He was implicated in the connected by and main plots of 1603 that sought variously to potentially kidnap James VI I in order to force him to be kind to Catholics, but also maybe to kill him so that he could be replaced by his cousin Arbella Stuart. Walter was placed in the Tower of London as a result, and there he would stay. A convicted traitor whom the king had chosen to spare. He would be there for the next 13 years. During this period, Bess had to manage all of the family's interests, such as they were, and if possible, she had to seek to improve them, for the sake of her husband, herself, and their offspring. Bess would also be a frequent visitor to her husband in the Tower. Indeed, she rented rooms on Tower Hill so that she could come and go even more freely as she pleased. In 1605, she would give birth to the couple's third child, Carew, who would be baptised in the chapel of St Peter and Vincula at the Tower of London on the 15th of February. Soon, Walter was able to convince his king that there was a land of gold to be found in Guyana. Walter also got him to believe that he might be potentially the only man who was able to find this El Dorado. Certainly, it seems that King James was convinced, inspired, and hopeful enough that he was prepared to allow Walter to be both pardoned and released from the Tower. He was going to allow him to plan this particular voyage of exploration. He also let him set off on it. The Guyana fleet sailed from Plymouth on the 12th of June 1617, but before they set off, the king was clear. He expected Walter to both find El Dorado and its treasure and return with it. But he also demanded that Walter and his fleet would do absolutely nothing that might incite conflict with either Spain or Portugal. The king could not have been more clear. The days of English privateering at the expense of Spain and Portugal were categorically over. Unfortunately, El Dorado doesn't exist, so Walter was always destined to fail in that part of the mission. On top of this, while on the voyage, Walter fell seriously ill with a fever and he had to rest. Meanwhile, the fleet and the men he commanded, while he was resting from his sickness, launched an attack on a Spanish settlement, the settlement of San Tomé, and clearly this is in direct contravention of King James's command. Adding to this, to the horror of it all, Walter and Bess's eldest surviving son, who was also called Walter, was killed in this violence. Walter Sr. would make the choice to return to England in 1618, and we aren't completely sure of why he did so. He must, on some level, have been aware of how bad things were, of how much danger he was in. Maybe he wanted to protect Bess and Carew from bearing the brunt of the king's fury. Or it could be that he thought that that fury was simply a political show, something that was put on for the benefit of Spain by the king. Or perhaps he thought that he had sufficient charm so that he would be able to obtain James's forgiveness. He did not. James was done. Walter was sent back to the Tower on the 10th of August 1618. Despite Bess petitioning for mercy and clemency for her husband, whom, by all accounts, she continued to love deeply, Walter was executed on the morning of the 29th of October 1618 at Westminster. It took 2 blows of the axe to sever his head from his body. That body was then buried at St Margaret's, Westminster. But his head, we are told, was taken away by Bess in a, quote, red leather bag. And here are where the rumours start to come in. Some say that Bess had Walter's head preserved and displayed in a case, while others say that she transferred this preserved head into a velvet bag so that she could carry it with her always, even, apparently, to parties. And here we arrive back at the bag from the start of this video, because it's said that this bag, found just a few years ago in the attic of West Horsley Place, where Bess herself lived with her son Carew Raleigh and his family, may be the very bag in question. Now, it is worth mentioning that there is no extant contemporary source that refers to Bess toting Walter's head around the place in her purse, and I do think that someone would probably have made a note of that. I mean, is she whipping it out to show them? Surely people would have stopped hanging out with her if she did that. But that doesn't mean that she didn't keep the head, or indeed that she didn't put it in a bag. Bess would never remarry, and it is possible that she kept his embalmed head with her always until her own death 29 years later in 1647. Bess's character, I think, peeks out at us through these records and also through the rumours. She appears to me as a woman of profoundly strong character, a formidable individual capable of deep and abiding affection, even when that affection potentially ran counter to her own self-interest. And we do get another tantalising glimpse at Bess through a 1609 diary entry about her that is produced by her loving and affectionate older brother, Sir Arthur Throckmorton. It's important, I think, to remember that he does like his sister. In it, he calls Bess Morgan le Fay. She is the healing and shape-shifting enchantress who was the sister to the legendary King Arthur. So, is Bess's brother simply playing on his own name here? Or is he telling us something about his sister, how he views her, who she was? Maybe it's doing all of these things. But what do you think about Bess? What do you think she was actually like? Do you think that she did keep Walter's head? Do you think that she did, in fact, carry it around with her? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your conversations in the comment section underneath this video. Or you can find me elsewhere on social media. I will leave links to all the other places you can find me on the internet in my description box, so please do follow me over on some or all of those so that we can continue this conversation and start some others. I do hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful, and if you did, please do consider sharing with your friends. Please also let me know that you liked it by hitting the thumbs up. Make sure that you are commenting, even if it's just an emoji. It really helps the algorithm. And additionally, please do subscribe to the channel. If you think you are subscribed, please do also have a little check. Make sure that YouTube hasn't mysteriously unsubscribed you against your will. And while you are there, checking, subscribing, maybe resubscribing, you're going to notice that there's a little bell icon that sits beside the subscribe button. Please do hit that bell icon and then also select all in the drop down that's going to appear. So that way YouTube will tell you, they claim, when I have next uploaded, or indeed when I'm next going live, because I am doing that regularly now. So make sure that you are all aboard the good ship Reading the Past with your subscription button pressed and your notifications turned on. I hope you're all going to have a great day, whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.